Welcome in to the Friday edition of the 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Blake Lovell with me today. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, but first of all, my goodness, the tragic news overnight of Kentucky's Terrence Clarke passing in an automobile accident in the Los Angeles area. Just awful news, Blake.
Yeah, it is. It's just, I mean, like you said, that was some of the things that was pointed out on Twitter. I mean, I think yesterday, the day before, he had just signed with Clutch Sports. He was getting ready, for the NBA draft, and I think it was they were coming back from a workout. I think in Los Angeles, and yeah, just just awful. There's no other way to put it. I think just to have that, of course, they also mentioned that the PJ Boston was, I guess they had worked out together, and he was in the car behind him. So you can only imagine what that's like for him. And I mean, yeah. I mean, I just I don't even know what you say. It's just one of those that, like we said, it's just man, it's yeah. I just don't even know how you even sort of process it again. And I always say this when I mean, anyone of any age, but I mean, just someone like that who had his whole life ahead of him and surely was, headed for a really good opportunity at the next level, and just, having his chance to kind of prove himself. And yeah, just an awful situation.
Yeah, those things are tough. And a lot of the world got out in front. There was just some awful speculation about BJ Boston that thankfully turned
Yeah.
out to be untrue. You and I have talked about this with covering Donnie Everett here locally. Those things are just so hard to cover from a journalistic standpoint. But yeah, that's the worst. I mean, I'm kind of out of words here, but that's one of those things that the news drops somewhere and you just kind of stop what you're doing, and your night sort of comes to a screeching halt in some ways.
Yeah. And I mean, that's, if you think about it, it's just like, man, I just, we have seen, I mean, it was the Grand Canyon, Oscar Freyer, I think was his name. And
Yeah, one of Bryce Drew's
yeah,
players.
and
Yeah.
he, had just played in the NCAA tournament, and what was it? I think, very shortly after, a car accident in the same sort of situation. And it's just, yeah, there's no other way to kind of be able to process these types of things. And it's just one of those where, like you said, I mean, this was someone we were going to be talking about going into the NBA draft, and just being able to kind of look ahead for him, and sort of look ahead and see what his prospects were. And I mean, again, I can only imagine. I mean, we talked about the Donnie Everett thing, and um, just as a team, and obviously as a family and friends and all this. But for John Calipari and guys like that, because we always talk about it. I mean, it's just like you spend so much time. I mean, these become your kids. And I think, just in that perspective too, just, when we talk about it from a team standpoint, and just the coach player aspect and all those other things. I mean, that's why it's just, man, it's hard for everyone. And yeah, just a truly tragic situation.
Yeah, as a parent, what we went through, nothing like this, but we had a scare with our daughter about 4 years ago, where there was a period of a night where we weren't sure if she was going to make it. It ended up being just a fluke thing, and she wound up being fine. But it's the worst. I think is just putting myself in the parent's shoes, and I've known parents who were like this. Having to bury a child, to me, is the worst thing imaginable, and is a sort of parallel. I think as a coach, it's one of those things that you're never quite the same again. We saw it here with Tim Corbin with Vanderbilt baseball after the Everett passing. Just for a couple of years, I think it was really difficult for him to get over that. I think I sensed almost broke him at times. You saw when they won the national title in 2019, his family being a part of the celebration, and I think that was a bittersweet moment, just very difficult for them. We saw it here with Bobby Johnson when they lost a recruit, Rajon Bennett. Bobby ended up resigning over the summer. I think that was one of the last straws. It was very difficult for him. He'd lost one of his players. I think 3 or 4 years before that, Kwame Doster. I don't know. I don't want to say too much here, but it's one of those things that that's awful. And I think to go through it on a parent or coach level, it sort of changes you. And I don't know that anything is ever the same again.
Yeah, and for me, going through all the player tributes and stuff, guys who were on that team last year, and obviously guys who had played with him before, at Kentucky in high school and, other AAU and places like that. It is, man. It's hard because again, and that's when you sort of look at the actual pictures of it and you're like, that is a young kid. Like you can just look at it and say, man, that is a young kid. And he was 19. And it's just, yeah, I mean, like you said, there's really no other. It's something that, from a coaching standpoint, it's just, yeah, I mean, teammates and obviously family, friends. It's just one of those things that, like we said, I mean, literally, we had just the day before, people had just talked about, him signing and, with the Clutch Sports, the popular, agency and all that. And yeah, one day later, it's just like, man, that's how quickly things can turn in this life, and it is, yeah, it's just something that's always hard to comprehend. So,
Well, and unfortunately, tragedy is not new for the Kentucky athletics community. Ben Jordan, one of their baseball pitchers, died in January, a kid who I think would have probably had a role on this team. So that's a community that's just really been hit hard by tragedy. Anyway, our prayers to the families and the players and everybody at Kentucky who's been affected, because it's just awful. But let's move on to basketball. I guess not a lot of news in the transfer portal overnight as I'm scanning this, but you did have an interesting story. I guess Alan Flanagan at Auburn, who had thought about going pro, says he's going to return. What did you make of that?
yeah, I mean, I think for Alan Flanagan, he's someone, as we talked about. I mean, this is a guy that, I mean, had really kind of turned into a really, really good player. I mean, that's kind of what we looked at, sort of that as his breakout season last year in terms of what he was able to do. And I mean, as we talked about when we did our player rankings and such, we had considered him as one of our top 14 and even said, hey, maybe we're doing not a good job by not putting him in here, because he was kind of the person that carried that team for Auburn, given the Sharif Cooper situation and all of that. So I think that's huge for Auburn. And I think I had already sort of been projecting that they would have him next season. But now that for sure, I think that, to me, pretty much cements Auburn as a preseason top 25 team. Where they fall in that range, I'm not exactly sure. But I think, you kind of look at them and say that's a team that's going to have a lot of talent, especially with Flanagan coming back. If he can build off of that season he had this past season, he could have a really, really good junior year.
Yeah, he was kind of their Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
And when Sharif Cooper was hurt, I mean, he really took over games. I'm thinking of the Tennessee game in particular. I remember watching that one, and I was just really impressed at how he took his game to the next level that afternoon. And I just thought that if you get that out of Alan Flanagan next year, look out, because he to me looked like he's ready to become maybe one of the real superstars of this league.
Yeah, he is. And I think, that's where now, you look ahead and you're like, okay, well, people know that. Like, they know that he's a guy you have to keep an eye on. But, Auburn's also got some guys coming in. Of course, Jabari Smith, namely, as the probably top one there, as, a top 5 recruit. And, Walker Kessler, we talked about coming in as well. And some of the other guys they've added. All of a sudden you can't just turn your attention to Alan Flanagan or just a couple guys on that team. Auburn's going to have a lot of different options to work with. And I think that opens up even more for Flanagan, and that gives him an opportunity, potentially for him to really break out and take that a step further. But I have no doubt, just based on what we saw from him as a sophomore, he'll be playing in the NBA sooner rather than later.
He averaged last year 5.2 boards, 14.2 points, and 3.0 assists. I don't know what the list of players in the league that say average at least 10 points a game, 5 boards, and 3 assists was. How many guys did at least that? And by the way, he almost averaged a steal a game. He was just short. But I bet you the list of players who did that is no longer than probably 3 or 4.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, you said it best. I mean, Swiss Army knife, a guy that could just do a little bit of everything. And, he had to for Auburn because, having you had Sharif Cooper some, you didn't have him a lot. And he had to be the guy that sort of carried the load for a very inexperienced team. But he did it, spectacularly well. And I think that it's just one of those where now you bring a lot more talent around him. And I think he's going to be able to thrive.
Anything else with hoops?
Well, I mean, I know it's not easy to kind of transition.
There's always something else with hoops.
Well,
right?
And that's the thing is too. It's like we obviously the Terrence Clarke situation is just awful, but I mean there is significant news elsewhere with Kentucky, and it's kind of hard to even break it down right now. Just kind of knowing the situation, but well, I'll just mention it just because it is. I mean, it is noteworthy, but. Joel Justice, of course, who was the guy who, one of those rising stars, I think, in the coaching ranks, just given what he's done recruiting wise and all that. Reportedly, he is headed to Arizona State. That's a big loss, I think, just in terms of the recruiting and what he brought. I mean, I think that's a person, for Kentucky that's done a lot for that program. So I think that's obviously noteworthy in terms of that. And also, it looks like that I believe, was it Orlando Antigua also, I think, coming back to Kentucky now. So he was there before. He was at Illinois. Now he's coming back. And I think that Tony Barbee, he is getting the Central Michigan job. Yeah. So, the staff kind of, and we've seen this before with Kentucky, but you've got a bit of a staff turnover there. I think the Joel Justice one is certainly, as I said, pretty significant because he has played a big role in a lot of the recruiting they've done. I mean, he's been again one of those kind of younger guys that can really, I think, and he's proven it. I mean, he can just do a good job relating to kids, and he's been sort of an all-star for them in terms of helping out with recruiting there. So. He goes to Arizona State, and now it's a situation where that coaching staff looks a bit different than it did even a couple of years ago when Kenny Payne left, and now Joel Justice leaves, and you bring back Antigua and that. So that is something, as we said. Obviously, there's bigger stuff going on with the Kentucky basketball right now, but that is something that we'll probably be talking about heading into the off season and next season, just because. Those are pretty essential guys, or I think especially with Justice, like I said, from a recruiting standpoint. That's not to take anything away from Tony Barbee, but Joel Justice is just he's fantastic, and I think for him to go to Arizona State, that's a big pickup there for Arizona State.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. That's odd to move from Kentucky to Arizona State. I wonder if this was a move where John Calipari wanted to get Antigua back on his staff, because now apparently there's a bidding war between Kentucky and Illinois to get Antigua, which I didn't realize he'd been gone since 2014.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know it had been that long, but I really wonder what domino set all this off. Was it Kentucky trying to make a move here, or was it Kentucky losing an assistant that did this?
Yeah, it's very interesting. That's a good question, because again, I mean, I don't think there's any reason, if you're John Calipari and you're looking at what Joel Justice has done, not just from a coaching standpoint, but from a recruiting standpoint, I can't imagine there's any reason why you would want to, for someone like that. I don't know. Like, again, having talked to him before and just kind of knowing the type of coach that he is, like, I think that's a guy that, again, still very young. In the coaching profession, and I just think having him was a very nice thing to have on your staff, because he is someone that I think that understands the recruiting aspect of it, and just sort of, I think very, very smart, very just someone I think that's very well connected when it comes to the recruiting and all of that. So I think that aspect of recruiting and player development and those kind of things, I'm not sure. That is one that maybe there's you start to learn. Maybe it's just one of those where Justice felt like it was an opportunity for him to maybe get closer to, I don't know, getting a head coaching job somewhere. Although I think at Kentucky you would have had your pick, and I've heard him mention at some places mid-major type schools here recently, but I'm not sure. But it is something that it's at least interesting to know, because it is sort of one where Calipari is pretty much going to have to, turn over the majority of the staff heading into next season.
We done with hoops?
Yep.
Football, we've talked about the transfer portal with basketball, but one locally with Vanderbilt, Donovan Kaufman, who was maybe the highest rated kid that Derek Mason had signed at Vanderbilt, at least on the team last year, is leaving. He played in the spring game. He would have probably started at safety for them. He's hit the portal, and I suspect he'll either, this is complete speculation without info, wouldn't be surprised if he either ends up back in his home state of Louisiana or at Auburn, where Mason is now.
Yeah, that would make sense, right? I think because with this transfer situation, I think obviously it's really hard to exactly know where kids are going to go sometimes, but I think you start to connect those dots, like you just said, and that's where you start to say, okay, you can form a pretty decent opinion, or kind of analyze where does he go from here, and you would think that when you have those kind of previous ties, like you said with Mason now at Auburn, and or you just get back closer to home, which we know a lot of kids. And I think that's something too. Like people on the outside may think, well, I know maybe that's just a reason, but like there is a lot too. Kids just wanting to be back closer to home. Like we've seen that over the years, and I think that's something that does factor into the decision. So it'll be interesting to see, like I said, but not great for Vanderbilt.
Did you get a chance to watch any baseball last night?
I didn't get a chance to watch much at all. Honestly, I did see a little bit of LSU and Ole Miss, but didn't get to watch much of or any of Arkansas and South Carolina.
The Ole Miss LSU game was fascinating.
Well,
because
I know for you, there was one part in particular that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll stick to baseball first. First of all, Ole Miss hit Landon Marceau a little bit, and they hit a home run. Gosh, I can't remember who hit it now. I'll have to pull up the box score. But they go up. Then Ole Miss brings its closer in the seventh inning, and boy, that really went wrong for the Rebels, because not only did they end up losing the game, but now they've lost their closer, I would presume, for the rest of the series, although he'd not been pitching great to begin with. But that's one of those games, if you watched it last night, I think that was one of the most interesting baseball games I've watched all year, because it went back and forth. And Hayden Leatherwood at Ole Miss had to come out of the game, their right fielder. He ran into TJ McCants in center and got hurt. They bring in John Rice Plumlee, who pulls off a double play by catching a ball and gunning down a guy who tried to tag from first to second. In fact, that was Drew Bianco, Mike Bianco's son, who plays for LSU, did that. So I don't know that it's the wisest thing to tag up and try to advance from first to second on a sac fly to right against the starting quarterback for your football team, but he did. And to add another dimension to that, LSU had a runner on third who tagged to score, and with one out, you're just thinking, okay, I'm the ball's at the warning track. I'm not going to get gunned out. So he just kind of jogs home. Well, when the play at second happens, the out is made when he's one step for home plate. So not only do they give up a double play, but they don't get the run. But Dylan Cruz hits a home run in that one to win it late. LSU's bullpen, which had not held games, holds that one with Fontenot closing it out. But it was just a wild and very entertaining game to watch last night.
Well, and it's not ideal for Ole Miss, right? Because that's all we had talked about, is how, yes, they had a tough schedule to this point, but losing 3 series coming into this, and then you lose the opener here against LSU, and now basically you really want to be able to come back and win these next 2, but I've got to believe, that's still something to where Ole Miss is probably, that's starting to get in the back of your mind now. It's like, man, we lose this game to LSU, and We've already lost, 3 straight series here, and just not off to a great start. So that kind of puts your back against the wall going into these next 2 games. I mean, you feel like they certainly are going to win one, but you never know at this point. I think that's a team that maybe, like you said, just LSU did some things that maybe they've not done effectively this season, but they were able to do it in this game. And now for Ole Miss, you're just you start to look up and be like, man, we're losing some of these games, and games we feel like maybe we should be able to find a way to win. And now, like I said, you put yourself in a position where you need to win these next 2, because then you got South Carolina coming up, and then of course we talked about their finish to the season where they've still got series against Vanderbilt, Georgia. Got to go to A&M. So not a great start to this one for Ole Miss.
Well, and to add another layer of weirdness to it, Gunnar Hoagland didn't pitch game 1. And it sounds like he's going to maybe pitch game 3. He's got a small, I guess small with pitcher arms. You never know. Issue there. I think he's going to start game 3 if I'm recalling from memory. But they put Derek Diamond back into the rotation. He's the guy that they just took out because he's been getting hammered on Sundays. He goes 6 innings, gives up 1 run, only gives up 5 base runners, and then they bring Broadway in to close it out. Broadway just really got hit hard. He only gave up 2 runs in 3 innings, gave up 7 hits, and a lot of those were singles, but they were hit pretty hard for the most part. Of course, Dylan Cruz got the home run off him that ended up winning the game, but I don't know how much you've watched LSU, and I know it's not the year they won, and I wonder if Paul Maneri is going to survive this, but they've got 2 really good freshmen, Blake. Trey Morgan and Dylan Cruz are about as good a pair of freshman hitters as I remember in this league in a long time. They hit 1 and 2 for them. Morgan actually was the guy that sort of started the rally for Cruz. He takes a 3-0 pitch and just whacks it opposite way to right field to keep that inning alive. I think I've got the right inning, but those 2 kids, man, if you're an SEC baseball fan and you hadn't watched those guys, that's almost appointment TV, because I think those 2 kids are going to be really special for the Tigers by the time they're done. In fact, they are already.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, just a tough season overall, but you have to be able to, lean on things like that for the future. And like you said, you're not really sure exactly what the coaching situation can look like based on maybe how LSU finishes this season, but I mean, you have to be able to lean on something positive, and at least for those 2 guys, you can look at and say, all right, there's something we can build on moving forward, and maybe that translates into them having a pretty strong finish, and maybe can you use that going into the summer, into next season, and I'm not sure, but it's at least better than what it's been to this point, because as we talked about all year long, it's just been a pretty frustrating season there for the Tigers.
I'm looking on the Clarion Ledger. It says Gunnar Hoagland may be available this weekend. Boy, I don't like that language. It's a bicep issue, apparently. But, now Ole Miss has got Doug Nikhazy back, who threw last week probably the best game thrown by anybody not named Leiter in the league this year. So there's that. But it's just really odd. Ole Miss is just kind of like whack-a-mole. It's always, I think that's a really talented team. And if Ole Miss got to the College World Series and did some damage, I'm not surprised. And sometimes that's just how it goes. Sometimes it takes a while for you to get your stuff together and for the pieces to come into place. But, I didn't expect to see them. If Derek Diamond's going to give you what he gives you last night, and you're going to throw your closer for 3 innings, and you're going to hit Marceau a little bit, you'd think the outcome of that one's different.
Yeah, it's and that's what's that. I think it sets up for a pretty intriguing weekend here with those 2 games specifically, because I don't know, is there something more to just this Ole Miss struggle? I mean, as we said, losing 3 series coming into this one, and I don't know, that's something where you lose the first game of a series. I think it's always kind of fascinating how you bounce back, period, but especially for a team that, as we said, has had its fair share of struggles, even against some pretty good teams. But still, I think how they bounce back, maybe even tonight's game on Friday, that could tell you a lot about this Ole Miss team, maybe to finish the season.
All right, let's get to the really important thing here. When did LSU change its colors to blue.
Well, you had a really. I'm looking at your Twitter here now, and this was a
Is it
discussion.
taking off this morning?
Well, I don't think you're being called a buffoon like you were the other day. But
Oh, I was. Yeah. I think I called. I think I got patronized a little bit last night. Perhaps it's hard to tell.
That's Twitter. But
it is. I mean, I think that. Look, I see what I see. I see some hats that are purple and some that are blue, and I don't understand this.
Well, I mean, I get it. It's either it's an optical illusion or it's just one of those things. It's different. I mean, if you're listening to this, you have no idea what we're talking about. If you go to Chris's Twitter at ChrisLee70, and it's one of the top tweets on there. He has the picture here, showing the difference in color with the LSU hats in particular. And I mean, it's a clear difference. Now I'm looking at the comments, and some of the comments are pointing out that maybe this is maybe this is just the lighting, or some
it's not
sort
the
of
lighting. It's not the lighting.
Right.
I'm telling you, I saw them. I did not take the best picture, but I was watching these guys sitting side by side, and the lighting was hitting them all at the same angle.
Well, some people are also pointing, maybe it's just that someone's even got the GIF of the, I guess it's the Tide or whatever it is. Maybe it's a wash thing, where I don't know, but some people are also on your side and saying that, hey, it's a situation where maybe they just got the wrong color. But I don't like, is it, I don't know, like some people are thinking that it's a faded sort of thing. Is it, where maybe the hats have faded or one of those situations? I think that could be a possibility. I don't know. It's, that's the great mystery.
I think fading is part of it. Like,
I think so too.
You can tell the difference between the coaches and the players. Like,
Yes.
how
Right.
you get some players who will wear a hat that it looks like they give to their dog every day to
Right.
throw around the backyard. And they'll wear the same hat, and it gets faded and dirt, and that's definitely part of it. But it's just weird how but it's not that. It's like I would expect, like, if the hat faded, you would think it would be just like a lighter shade of the bluish purple of the version that Paul Maneri was wearing last. This is really bothering me here, as you can tell.
Well, I think we've got our next interview. We need to get the LSU baseball equipment manager on this podcast, and
I think so.
That's journalism right there. We need to get to the bottom of this. So, yeah, there you go.
I've got people poking back at me. This feels like a hill to die on. I mean,
I never thought when we started Southeastern 14 we were going to have an entire podcast dedicated to the LSU hat mystery, but we're going to do that at some point. So we'll tell you what day. Make sure you mark your calendars. So
there is something weird in the color that they use, and I'm guessing like it's a special LSU purple, or that they've all got these cute names for these. But like, you look at their batting helmets, and there is an element that, like, sometimes in certain lights they look almost blue, and sometimes they look purple. So there's something weird about the dye that they use too. I have to think.
Right. Yeah. That probably plays a role.
Yeah. And this is. I think this needs investigation here.
Well,
LSU, why your color's blue? When did you make a change?
We're the people to do it. So that's when we had our discussions. All right, we want to start an SEC podcast. We want to have a site. One of the things we really want to get into is, SEC fashion.
Dye lots.
And
right.
That's us. So
here's what I appreciate about our audience. Somebody actually, and if I had it in front of me, I would give this guy a shout out. He noticed as he took the image I took of Paul Maneri, he blew it up a little bit. And like the satin on Maneri's jacket was that blue, but then there was like a fabric patch that was definitely more the color of the purple. So
you can also count on Twitter to get to the bottom of this kind of stuff as well. So we appreciate the help on that.
There's at least one other person out there who gets it.
Right. We of our millions and millions of listeners, at least one right now is intrigued by this whole ordeal.
Well, I'm definitely getting the feeling that a lot of Twitter, has given me the the crazy uncle at the Thanksgiving dinner table who everybody's just waiting for the alcohol to dissipate and for him to take a nap. But
Well, at least you
you
didn't.
got to pick your battles, Blake.
At least it
I
wasn't
mean,
Arkansas, because if it was Arkansas, you would be. They would have. Oh man, Arkansas fans, they don't like you. So
I'm going to take on the whole SEC West this week. How about that?
there you go.
All right, South Carolina, Arkansas. Shout out to the Razorbacks for winning a big game. Of course, South Carolina does what it does. It loses the opener pretty much every series. But yeah, I mean, Arkansas just keeps on hitting. Carolina's pitching, I think, is really underrated. Although the one disappointment I have with them, Thomas Farr, who's got tremendous stuff, hadn't quite been as good as I'd like him to be or as I thought he could be. And so he gives up 4 last night, which the way Arkansas pitched, they really pieced it together. They got the start they needed out of Caleb Bolden, who they've got back pitching again. I think that helps them. The only negative for Arkansas, I thought last night, was they went to Cops for 3 innings. I'm guessing they can probably bring him back in a game 3, depending on the weather. I want to see if that's one of those where they throw him Saturday, or if that's a thing where they move up and play a Saturday doubleheader. If it's the first, then I kind of question what Arkansas did, because they had a 4-1 lead's not too big. When you bring in Kevin Kopps, you're basically saying we're going to get a win tonight. I just wonder if Arkansas, how it's going to handle the rest of the series, given the way their pitching staff is structured. They don't really have that one starter who you just know, okay, this guy's going to give you 6 innings and it's going to be okay. Of course, with their bats, you have a little bit more of a luxury, but that was really interesting how that one played out too.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't get a chance to see. I don't think I may have saw in a half inning of that game, but I mean, I know you guys have talked about Arkansas, and certainly when you look at where they are right now, and I think that was kind of the fun part of the podcast we did, yesterday, looking ahead and kind of projecting out the rest of the season for Arkansas, where the schedule shapes up pretty nicely. But these are two pretty important games here, obviously for them. Like you said, maybe it turns into a situation where you kind of see how this doubleheader plays out, or however they're going to do it. But yeah, I mean, South Carolina I'm looking at the box score here, but like South Carolina just could not get anything going with the bats, to say the least. Only a couple of hits. So.
Well, speaking of not getting it going with the bats, Wes Clarke, I don't know what's going on with him in SEC play, but I think he's hitting, gosh, he may be below 200 in the league now. He was 0 for 4 last night, 2 strikeouts. He was the guy that was like ahead of our power ratings for forever, and the numbers overall are great. He's got 15 home runs. That's at or near the leaderboard in college baseball, but man, at some point you got to hit in league play.
Tell you what's his average overall. I think for the season's down to 270. I think is where he's at now, or maybe it's worse than that.
Yeah, which is not that.
Right,
and the batting average doesn't bother me as much because he walks a lot. But yeah. I don't understand why he is not producing in the league.
Yeah, no, I mean it's. That's I don't know. That's one of those things that is the pitching? Is it? I'm not sure, but yeah, he's just not. Like as you said, we have not sort of talked about him in the same, sort of range that we were talking about once we were, mentioning games and the pre-conference and all that. And it's just been completely different.
I'm trying to see how many multi-hit games he's had in the SEC. The last one he had was against Missouri on April the 10th. He had 3 hits against Georgia on the 3rd of April. And that's it.
Wow.
He went 0 for the Vanderbilt series. He had 2 hits in the Florida series. He had 4 in the Georgia series, 3 in one day, 3 in the Missouri series. And he had 1 against LSU.
Yeah. So that's not what you would expect, probably, or not what we expected at all coming into conference play.
No. Okay, Blake, anything else before we end the show?
No,
on this Friday.
I think that's, like we said, that's sort of SEC baseball. Lots of fun games probably this weekend, and we get closer and closer to the tournament, and not that far away at this point.
Help us figure out this LSU color mystery.
Right. Send your hate mail to at Chris Lee 70 on
That's
Twitter.
right. I'll take it all. All right. For Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee, host of the 14. We appreciate you listening. Check out our content at southeastern14.com. That's free. Feel free to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. That helps us out, helps us get noticed. But anyway, have a safe and happy weekend, and thank you for listening to the Friday edition of the 14. We'll see you again with another one on Monday.